and welcome back to Reading the Decades with me. Today I have my August wrap up for you, a bit late as usual, and I'm very sorry about the light situation, but it's a very dark and gloomy day, and in my corner it is very dark, and I think the camera has a few problems with the light or the bit of light that's coming in. But let's get straight into the books that I read. I start with all the ebooks. Of course I don't have physical copies of them, so just talk about them without anything to hold up. The first ebook I read was Tim Weaver's No One Home, where a detective has to investigate the vanishing of a whole but tiny village. It was quite interesting. Of course, like, a whole village is disappearing. Well, it was only, I think, 9 or 10 people, so it was a very tiny village. But at parts it was a bit too long and also a bit repetitive. Then I read Gabriel Bergmoser's The Hunted, which is a horror survival novel set in Australia, which I enjoyed immensely. After that I read Agustina Basterical's 10 Days of Flash, which, I don't know, is it a masterpiece or is it trash? It is definitely very bizarre, and you keep thinking about it for a long time. It is about a society where it is normalized to breed and manufacture humans for the consumption of human flesh. And although I was very intrigued by this concept, the ending was really rushed and the characters made decisions where you would think they wouldn't do that when you've learned about them already from what they did before in the book. So yeah, the ending definitely did need some work. Otherwise I was quite alright with that, although the concept was really bizarre. Quite opposite of that story is Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is about two young writers, and they're writing their new books and are falling in love, and they're living opposite each other or next to each other in a little town. I had really high hopes, but I got disappointed big times, and I think it's just because I'm not a romance reader, so there was nothing wrong with that book. I think it's just not, I'm not the audience for that book, and I should have realised that before. But if a book is about authors, it always sucks me in, so go on and read their book for yourself. If you're a huge romance fan, it was definitely not for me, and I should stay away from romance novels. A very good book was Magpie Lane by Lucy Atkins. The story of a nanny in Oxford who takes care of a neglected child. The best part of the book, I honestly have to say, was the setting, because obviously Oxford as a very historical town, and lots of characters were in relations with the university, and also the house they all lived in might or might not have been inhabited by a ghost. It also had wonderful characters. One of my favourite characters was a so-called house detective who had an absolutely incredible knowledge about the history of Oxford, and talked about that, and I was very fascinated by what I learned from that novel. Finally, after 2 years after its publication and 2 years of it being on my shelves, I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I got disappointed. I had so many high hopes for that after conversations with friends became one of my all-time favourite novels, but Normal People just couldn't offer anything new to me. It wasn't a bad book at all, but it wasn't what I expected. Again, this problem, and I just had hopes for more and for something new, and yeah, I'm very sad about that, because I waited 2 years to read this one because I didn't want it to be over, and then actually while I was reading it, I really wanted it to be over. So maybe also I'm a bit too old for the story, but if a story is good, you should never be too old or too young as a reader. I don't know. It just wasn't for me. A very important book that dealt with real events that I read was Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. The story takes place at a reformatory school for wayward boys, or for the ones who get, who experienced injustice and got sent there, like our main character. And it was just very, very horrible to read about that. And also in the beginning of the book there's a statement about the connection to the real events. And yeah, it was a very hard read, but I think it is a very, very important read. Then I read Anbara Salam's Belladonna, which was fantastic. This one is set in the 50s in America and mainly Italy. The story is about two girls who are friends with each other who go to boarding school together in Italy in a nunnery. And it's about their friendship, it's about how different they actually are from each other, and it is about what they would do for love. I really, really enjoyed that one, and it's also a new release of 2020. The rest of the books that I read are all non-fiction, so if you're not interested in non-fiction, I say goodbye to you here, but for everybody else, please stay on. I read this very short book called Nova Scene by James Lovelock, which is about humanity entering a new geological epoch. He explains that in connection with his Gaia hypothesis, and he gives a very good overview of the Anthropocene, which is the era before the Nova Scene. And I think this book was a really, really good starting point if you're interested in that topic. It gives a very good overview over all the important and relevant aspects. Then I read a book by a YouTuber, and I'm usually not a fan of reading books by YouTubers, at least I'm not a fan of reading novels by YouTubers. But the book that I read was Space, 10 Things You Should Know by Dr. Becky Smethurst. So, as the title already suggests, this book talks about 10 very interesting facts about the universe and space that are extremely well and easy to understand presented in this book. Like, everybody can understand that. You don't have to be or you don't have to have an affinity with the topic. You don't need any prior knowledge to anything that is described in here. And this book and Dr. Becky actually inspired me to pick up the topic of natural sciences again, and I also start taking astronomy courses this winter. So yeah, thanks to this book and thanks to Becky Smethurst. Another very good book by the Italian literary critic Piero Bottani is A New Sublime, 10 Timeless Lessons on the Classics. So this is also, as the title suggests, 10 lessons on ancient classics and classics from the antiquity. And I really enjoyed that, and I really lacked a bit of knowledge in this area. I did Latin and philosophy at school for my A-levels as well, but since then, so what is that, 10 years since, like for 10 years I haven't really been back to the topic, so I thought I should go back into it, and this was a really good starting point. The lessons are in very great detail. He gives excerpts from texts and analyzes them, and yeah, can definitely recommend this to everybody who's interested in the topic or wants to see if they're alright with reading the classics, studying the classics, so this is a little taster for that. And the last book I read was The Little Book of Psychology by Emily Rawls and Caroline Ricks, which is seriously a very, very little book. It's just like as big as my hand, but it gives all the relevant information you need to know if you want to get into psychology. It gives a very good overview and the most important approaches to different fields of psychology. And actually I started studying psychology this September, so this was a very, very good taster of the topic for me. And even if you're not studying it, or if you're just interested, I can really recommend this. It only has like 130 pages, so you can read that in an afternoon and maybe refresh your knowledge from school or just learn something new. These are all the books that I read in August. I don't think I'm going to read quite as much in September because I'm already deep into studying, and obviously that takes up a lot of time. So yeah, I bet the September wrap up is going to be a short one. Until then, happy reading.